class and people were like trying to launch that.
That never
It's
gonna
not gonna happen. I was like, damn, it really doesn't happen. Okay.
Alright folks, well let's get started today. We are going to be videotaping our class, mostly this side real quick. But you still count.
You guys log off. You guys take the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to switch?
Oh yeah. Okay. Anika Anthony could not make it today, so we might be doing this from now on, but this is just going to be a help. I asked her if she would appreciate that, and she would, so we just decided to accommodate. Wow, lots of things to talk about today. We still are missing Joan and Ben. And Molly, can't forget Molly. And she's going to have a tough time getting there. What happens when she walks in the door?
We won't do this.
Is she left brain or right brain?
She's all brain. That's Molly.
She's
That's all
She's
brain?
all brain.
Okay, well,
Oh, look who's here.
All brain.
All brain.
left brain.
What am I?
You can go through this way. This might be better. This pathway.
Nope, left brain.
Would you like me to not
Stand right there. Just stand right there.
Yeah.
There you
The back of your head is in the video.
Oh, it's the video camera. I get it. I didn't see that one.
Or stop playing with the video.
She might have been more front and center on it.
Yeah.
I think she's fine. Okay, great. Well, we also have Ben and Joan coming. It really makes no sense for you to be anywhere else other than right by Josh.
I'm the biggest for you.
I thought Allbrain would get it without saying it.
I think we jinxed it.
We did. Sorry about that. All right. So,
It's been a long day. I was up at 4:15 this morning at that constellation.
Why?
I was watching laparoscopic incision hernia repair this morning at the medical center.
That sounds like a whole bunch
fun.
of just
So an eventful day then.
Yeah.
Sounds like grounds for a design challenge to me.
Yeah. It was for medical device design, so yeah.
All right, folks. These are what these Wednesdays are going to be. They're going to be kind of a learning community. We're going to circle up every Wednesday. If we want to, you can schedule some time where you can do your presentations beforehand. Let's say you need some more practice with the group. Kind of like what we did last Wednesday where we put people through the grinder. I thought that went pretty well. Like that was actually pretty helpful. When I went and observed different classes, I got to see.
Bryce's Elsa came in and said, oh yeah, they were doing that. I mean, what, like 2 seconds ago she goes, they were doing that for
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday and it actually happened on Monday.
Yeah,
That's
one of
really
our kids
cool.
tried to launch into what I could tell was going to be a really long anecdote, and I was like, okay, we're not going to go there right now.
Very
They
good.
do a great job reeling them in, I will say that.
Awesome. Well, we definitely want this to be valuable time. So if anybody wants to do those presentations again, please just let me know ahead of time so I can schedule that in. Okay. This Wednesday's a little late for that, but in the future. Hi Ben. Welcome. Anywhere you please, honestly. You can sit in these 2 seats and hopefully Joan will be able to make it today. We are videotaping it, just so you know. I still need videos from Roland, Elsa, Double Trouble, because both of your group members didn't do it, Joan, and then Mr. Grant. I think I have all from everyone else. Hi, Joan. How are you today? Good. Welcome. Okay. I was just recounting the people that still need to turn in videos. Most of you have at least talked to me about this, but I heard some great things, first of all, from Roland's class, where we had talked a lot on Friday about how to improve the presentation. And I got rave reviews about using those small clips of video. What did you use? Just so the rest of the class can know?
One of them was just a green radar screen like you see in the movies. Another one was a clip of a giant radar system spinning that you see at the airport. Okay. And another one was
It was essentially like a radar screen, and then I showed it bouncing off an actual.
Oh yeah,
thing.
how a radar works. Yeah, like a plane flying into a radar, kind of bounced off. That's bad.
Great.
So,
So moving on, before we get to like our discussion piece, just want to encourage you guys to consider that multimedia source for what we've done. I've heard that there was a little bit of problem on Monday because of sound. If you have your own personal speakers, I recommend bringing them. If you do not have them, please let me know. I have at least two, one from Howard and one from my desk. And then anybody else, I can start scrounging. And I've been pretty good at scrounging things so far, right?
Yeah.
So let's see if I can do some more. I still have things like Velcro and like things, random requests that people made, like tubs and stuff that nobody ever really wanted. Thus they just stuck with me. So I'm gonna scrounge some like diamond rings or something like that and then just be like, oh, oops.
I'll take those.
No. Okay. Another comment that I want to say before we get to the discussion piece. You need to learn your names of the students that have been consistent. You got it, Elsa and Roland?
four
Oh, yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
4 of them. Okay. Well, that's nice when you only have 4 students, but some of you guys have seen the same people quite a few times. And I've heard noticeable differences for the classes that know names and the classes that don't know names. We had quite a few observers come this past Monday, some pretty important people. Elsa and Roland, we're coming back here. Okay. You can call them out by name if you know it. You get them right back into attention, okay? So we had Dave Tomasco, Assistant Dean of Research.
Undergraduate Education and Student Services.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that's, what's the research? Randy Moses. Okay. So he was he's a big wig that came in and observed, really liked what he saw. I was really proud of what I saw as well, but there's still lots of room for improvement that I want to talk about. But him, Lisa Abrams, different people had at least that comment that they could kind of notice and tell whether or not people really knew the names and were really connecting with the students. So if you don't know the names, you have 3 weeks left, and I encourage you to have them down pretty much by the end of this upcoming week, this upcoming Monday, okay? Or at least pushing yourself to do so. There's lots of things to talk about. Let's just open up the floor. Who wants to talk about some things that happened on Monday and maybe open it up for discussion for anything that you saw, good, bad?
I'll start.
Okay.
Our kids all came in with an attitude. All of
By the
them
way, they have the toughest room. I've seen all of them. These guys have seen all of them. They have the toughest
I started
room.
out in that room, you could feel the attitude.
Yeah, they're 8th graders, and they came in, they're just like rolling their eyes, and like slumping in their seats, and we're in front of the room like, yeah, engineering, and they're like, their faces are like this, and it was just like, and it started to like, I don't know about you, it started to like wear off on me a little bit. I was kind of like, ugh, I don't want to be here either. And then once we got them going with the stuff, they were super engaged. They were like totally digging it. They were thinking outside the box. It was like the best that they've ever been. So our kids did like a 180 within like a half an hour, which was really cool. So like, I don't know, like advice to you guys, if you, like the kids come in with an attitude, you can still kind of save the day. Like don't feel like totally blown out of the water. So that was really interesting. I thought the day was gonna be a wash, but they ended up really being into it.
I was nervous, I laughed.
You mean like
I was like, all right, I'll come back in a half hour and see where they are.
Because there's only so much you can do
All
at
the time.
times.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Randall, what do you think?
Pretty much agreed. There was some discipline problem. Like we had 3 KIP administrators come in and like start talking to kids in the middle of our presentation. It was kind of weird, and we got a couple pulled out, but they started coming together as we started playing stuff.
How did your training help you survive? What were some of the things that you did?
It was better because they'd been really good up until this Monday. They were all excited, and then it was the first time they goofed off and we didn't want to be able to. It was helpful Monday or last Wednesday.
Yeah, getting their attention was like being able to pull them back in, we were able to do that a lot better.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any comments? Things, similar experiences, maybe seeing the group change? Yes, Molly.
I think that ours came in with a pretty positive attitude. We have people on both ends of the spectrum. We have a few people that are all about engineering and are so excited. We had one student that at the end asked us what we were doing next week because they wanted to Google search it ahead of time. And so we've had students on that end of the spectrum, and then we also have students that don't like want us to be there at all. Like they don't like. They want to know, like, they want one right answer, and they don't want to really think outside the box. But, and then the students in the middle, and the students in the middle, I think, are the ones that we're like pulling towards the enthusiasm. And we had one student in particular that, like, literally was like, I give up, I'm not gonna, you know, I like he was basically trying the prototype over and over, and essentially gave up, and I like took it and I was like, well, how else could we attach this here? And he was like, I don't know, I give up. And I was just like, I kept like kind of like poking at him, and then he was like, oh, I get it. And then he like ended up completing he ended up completing the second task, which was the hardest one. So nice. It was cool.
One of the kids completed the third task, and Molly and I couldn't even do it.
We did do it though. We did it like there were 3 tasks. And the first one was pretty easy.
Yeah.
The jump to the second one was like more difficult, and we did that faster than they did,
Yeah.
but they jumped from the second to the third faster than we did when we were making prototypes.
Wow, that's
So-
fun to see.
Yeah.
Could you tell us like a brief description of what the 3 tasks were?
Sure.
So the first one was being able to unlock the key. We changed the design challenge moderately significantly between when you guys heard about it and
I'm gonna make a quick note about that. This class, you kind of are independent agents that have like a connection point with me, maybe some other people like Paul, Howard, maybe some of our teachers, Steve and John. You really don't have a full scope of what everything is going on, and it's pretty exciting because it'd be good to hear what kind of design challenge you actually did, why it was, you know, what happened with it. Theirs was pretty new by the time they walked in that day. So was Ben and Jones, Roland and Elsa's. Shayla and I, you know, like we took some time to get that working, so that wasn't even that old. Nate, you had yours before, but we had to make some interesting substitutions last minute. I think your guys' was pretty good from a while ago, right? So,
Yeah.
but 1 out of 6, I would say. So everybody has that, and that's part of the process. So, if you can, just give a quick, you know, what is your design project and all this sort of thing.
So we were essentially modeling the way that cells talk to each other through ligands and receptors using locks and keys. So the first task was creating a platform. So in my lab we used DNR origami to create a platform that holds the ligands, so the key. So the first was to create a platform that was strong enough to unlock the lock and they're allowed to touch the lock. That was goal 1. The next one was they're not allowed to touch, not the lock, the key. So they touch the lock the whole time for all 3. It's what they hold with the structure. So the first one is holding the key, which essentially anything they make is going to be strong enough because they're holding the key. And then step 2 was holding just the structure. So that's really when the structure had to be strong enough to fully hold the key and stabilize the key. And then step 3 was attaching it to a block of wood and not touching anything at all and just coming down. And then once they did that with a certain number of rubber bands, we were challenging them to, can you attach it with fewer rubber bands and fewer rubber bands? And we had a student attach it with 1 rubber band and get it to unlock, which was pretty
That was
cool. Yeah.
That is awesome. Very cool.
And we had a lot of students get through the second one.
Mm-hmm. There were some like
say
really,
3/4.
there were some creative solutions. I was like really surprised.
Yeah. And some of them turned the block on the side and then attached it that way to get solution 3, which I didn't think of at all.
Yeah.
So,
Searching for loopholes.
which I mean
Found
was a great
pretty
idea.
good one.
Yeah, but
Anything else? People are like burning to talk about. Jonah's at a hand?
Yes.
Okay.
Burning to talk about.
Well, okay.
So there's this, one of our students, Reggie, I say at least one of our brightest students, like she always like immediately comes up with one of like the most creative solutions, like right from the bat. Like she just like, it just comes to her, and she always keeps it a secret, like she wants to keep it a secret and not let anybody know. And so it's interesting because like, even though I can totally see a lot of potential in her, like her behavior and discipline wise, she's kind of like all over the place. And so like she gets really excited like when she builds it and it works. And she just like doesn't know how to be humble guys. She's like, yeah, like I did it, you know. And like everyone's kind of like, oh, okay, everybody's doing her thing. Now
And
she's
like the
gonna
numbers
win
like
it.
slowly increase.
Yeah, like she just says. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but you want to describe.
Yeah, Ben, why don't you describe what we got for?
Yeah,
for
so there were like 4 of you left on Wednesday when I did my thingy. But so what we had was we had like a fan on the bottom, and then we had like a plastic chamber thing, and it was sitting in Andy's office. And so we put some packing peanuts in there and turn on the fan so they swirl around like a money box thing that people stand in or whatever. So we had them take a solo cup and was like that was their cell, and they were trying to catch the drug. And so they modified their cell to try and get as much as possible.
So like Regina, right off the bat, she like knew that opening up the surface, like opening up and adding stuff to the cup so that, you know, like a fountain cup was obviously the way to go. And then she like knew to like add tape so that the sticky side of the tape would catch all of it. So she had this this huge,
This massive structure that would barely fit.
Everyone else like started out with covering the hole, which I was like, no. I was like, how are you gonna get the packing peanuts inside? They're like, oh no, we want to like, keep the packing peanuts inside once it's in there. And I was like, how is it gonna get in there in the first place? And they were like, oh right. I was like, yeah. So I don't know, but so once she started off, she just kept growing and growing to the point where we really didn't think this would be a problem, but her design was too big to fit in the thing. So like we had to tell her to like redesign, and she didn't understand. Like she's like, well, they got 2 tries, 3 tries because the other teams like knew how to modify quick, like, and so they got multiple tries in the sheet because her design was just so big. She like it took her longer to modify, and so she towards the end she started to get really irritated. Like, why can't I test? Like they tested 3 times, you know. And I was just like, well, Sanaya here has been waiting, you know, like 5 tries. And so it was interesting because we're in a position where we're not exactly like teachers, and we can just be like, bam, like laying down the law and just, you know, be really like authoritative. But at the same time, we can't exactly let them just get out of hand. So it was interesting how we were trying to be firm with her, like letting her know that she has to wait for her turn. But I try to make a conscious effort by like showing that like, oh, like, well, see, look, Sanaya here has been waiting for 5, you know, like there are 5 people before her, instead of just being like, Jay, you can't, you have to wait in line, you know. And so like we're just like trying. It was interesting. But
Jack, go ahead.
You done?
yeah.
Great. I was actually just scratching my head, but I did have something to say.
My thoughts exactly. Go ahead.
So what I've been trying to do with one student who's particularly uninterested, we have this girl named Sarah who's totally disinterested in anything engineering, just puts her head down. In my comment that I made, I think to you guys when you're up there, does this have anything to do with psychology? That's what she asked me all the time, just constantly, like, how does engineering apply to my psychology major? I'm going to be a psychology major, I don't care about this. And I'm like, well, design process is good for everyone, you know, try and give her that spiel, but she's like, no, this doesn't make any sense, I'm not going to take math or science classes, I'm just going to be a psychologist, so on. I'm like, okay, fine. But, so I try and like, I guess what I've been trying to do is just talk to her about like her books and her poems and stuff, because she just writes poems instead of doing the thing, but I don't know, I'm trying to still just connect to her, but I'm having trouble getting her to show any interest in what we're doing, or even attempt what we're doing at all.
I forgot to tell you this last week, and I wanted to, we ran out of time, because we were doing the paperweight challenge, when we did the paperweight challenge, and she did not want to do it. She said, what does this got to do with psychology? I said, well, you know, there's icebreaker activities. Yeah, well, that's when they bring Play-Doh out, and that's when you go through the Play-Doh. And she had all these things how psychologists were going to do all this. I said, well, what do you like to do? I like to write poems. I'll tell you what, why don't you write a poem inside what you think would fit in the shape that you want it to be for the paperweight. She did, and then she cut it out, and she had a poem inside of that. And so I got her to do it with a poem in there. So if you can bring a poem in somehow into whatever it is, I know that
Maybe she'll do it.
it really
Yeah. She told us, she said her phone to us as she was leaving. She said, I
Yeah,
wrote this
she's very
instead
proud
of doing
of
the
it.
engineering
Yeah.
thing. And I was like, cool.
Yeah, she's very proud of it. So even on the when you're doing the graphic, I didn't even think. I mean, put a poem down the center of it or whatever, and then it motivates you.
That's cool.
Okay, interesting.
That's
Elsa?
We're actually slightly different. It's not really a problem. All our kids are really well behaved, and like they're all at least doing stuff. But we seem like the girls are all like, oh, let's do this, and then the guys are like, let's do this, but let's not really think about what we're doing. Let's just like do stuff. And then so I like don't really know if that's okay, if that's like part of just like how they are and that's how they should be. That's how they deal with their design process, because we're still like talking with them like, oh, what are you thinking about doing next? Like, what's your thought process? Why do you think this is going to work? So we're still taking them through that process, but it's just like, it seems to me like they're like off topic without being off topic. Does that make any sense to anybody else?
Yeah, they're just like
Definitely.
instinctive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting that across the board, I feel like.
Yeah.
Maybe more boys, but girls too, some.
This brings up a interesting topic that I wanted to get to. Hopefully our discussion can answer some things that Elsa talked about, but also I want to bring to light specifically the design process. How many people actually used a sheet on Monday? We had 1, 2.
I did,
But at the end, that's right. So we had some people that talked to me about not using like a paper to kind of change things up a little bit. They kind of considered it like homework. It was lots of resistance. And I'd like to talk about what your thoughts are, but I want to kind of start it off with also a little bit of a challenge, because I could see how removing that element would help your engagement. Like I could see how people would be like, oh yeah, this isn't homework. I'm enjoying this, I get it, let's play. But the problem that I have with this is, how do we know that they actually learn anything about the engineering design process? And not just science concepts, or even just an interest or a piqued interest in the engineering realm. So how do we make sure, and maybe final things before you guys are ready to talk, how do we also communicate this knowledge gain to others outside of that classroom? Like, you can tell me all day, hey, they get it. But is there any way of proving that? Okay, we have quite a few. I think I saw Josh first. I'll allow him to go.
So Molly and I have a couple things to say. So Molly and I noticed when we did the paperweight one that they were just like scribbling all over it. They weren't actually like really like working through it. So this today we broke off into 2 groups. Like Molly took one group and I took another group, and we just kind of like sat them down. And I know at least this is what I did. I was like, so what's the problem here? And I had them like talk about, like, identify the problem, and I pretty much like try to walk them all through the design process. And I think that was more effective than having them just like try to do it themselves, because they're just gonna scribble all over those sheets.
Oh yeah. So, Molly, since you're a partner, you want to add to what he's saying?
Yeah, so the reason that they were, I think, scribbling on the sheets was because I was holding the paperweight in my hand the whole time, and I was making them show me their sheet before because the first week they didn't fill it out at all. Like, they just left it blank.
Right.
So then I was like, okay, this week I'm gonna make them fill it out. So I held the paperweight, and when they came to test it, like, oh yeah, did you redesign? Like, what's your, what did you cut off? And they would tell me, and I was like, oh, did you draw that on your sheet? And they'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, can I see your sheet? They'd be like, no. So then I would be like, okay, let's go over and look at your sheet. And I would get over to their sheet, and they would just like scribble a couple lines and be like, yeah, it's this one right here. And then, you couldn't tell what they were trying to draw, which I wasn't sure if it was, lack of artistic ability, or
Yeah,
just, straight up scribbling. And
So resistance, I
Yeah.
understand that.
so as Josh was saying, we split up this week, and Josh had 5 students and I had 4, and we put a table in between them, so there was some separation, clear separation between our sides. And we did the prototype separately. So collectively, we each did one prototype instead of having them each make one, which was time consuming, and they didn't really get it, and they didn't want to follow instructions. So we just had the prototype, and we had them all try it. Like, why does this work? Why does this not work? And they all tried it, and a lot of them were like, oh, this doesn't work because it's the wrong key. And I'd be like, oh, well, does it not work because it's the wrong key? Okay, or it's the wrong lock? Okay, let's try the other lock, and then it still wouldn't work. So it's not that. Well, maybe it's because, and they would like throw out all these ideas. So once I got to the point where they all, and I think you did the same thing, where they all understood the prototype, that's when we started to build. Well, that's when we started to brainstorm. And we basically just each went around our own table and worked with each individual student, and like worked them through, okay, that didn't work, right? Why didn't it work? Like, let's think about this. And I think that was a lot more effective. I think that that's why they ended up coming up with solutions that worked, rather than in the previous weeks, they would just cut paper off or just stuff things inside.
There's lots of people. I'm wanting to call on people that don't have their hand raised, actually. Nate and Grant, what about you guys? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I really agree with that method of walking them through, at least with the 5th graders. Like, it was the same thing. Like, they were not interested in the paper at all. But then with the prototype, I had them we all walked through it together, like the groups, they all made it. And then they all got to come up and test it. And every single one of them flew off the side, like, immediately, because, like, of how the other prototype, like, it was not designed to go straight. And so basically, then they would go back to their seats, and then like I'd have them raise their hands, like, what happened wrong? Like,
They actually, their entire class period was a lot more of guided tour. Like, you walked with them every step of the way. Instead of having like an open-ended thing, you really were with them every stage. And they had open-ended time, but you were with them through everything. And I thought it worked well, especially for your younger group. What about you, Grant?
Well, I think a big improvement was our testing itself didn't require a person to monitor it, really. So it gave us a lot more freedom with working with the students directly, which was a huge deal for 5th graders because they need to be guided or they're just going to play with the materials, basically. And I mean, so we didn't really direct them creatively, you know what I'm saying. But
Still working on those communications.
Yeah.
That's what this body is for.
I think it was like this kid Robert, he was having difficulties, so I like explicitly told him like one way to build it that it would work kind of well, and then I told him you can't do this exactly, but you can steal from my ideas.
Okay.
So
this gets into the subject I want to remind us, learning outcomes. Not just how well did it run, but how well did they learn? What impacted them? Jack?
What I was going to say about the sheets is I don't know that that is real proof that they learned either. Because if we're going to be talking to them as a group, or even not as a group, but they're collaborating with each other, and we're saying like what worked and what didn't work, it's a lot of times, it seems like in our class, we've got 8-ish to 10-ish kids, sometimes 7 to 10-ish kids. It's like 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5 kids that participate and understand what's going on, and they kind of control everything, just kind of make the design challenge happen. So I mean, with sheets, I think it really, for the majority of the kids, it's just proving that they can write down what they hear works, or what they see works. It's not them really figuring it out.
Joan, then Howard.
I agree with Jack, because the reason why in the real world you have documentation, stuff like that, engineering design problems, because your problems aren't very simple. They're not like these engineering where you can really visualize it because it's a couple things, you know, like that's why there's SolidWorks and stuff like that, because it's so complex. But on a middle school level, I've personally seen them just go through the engineering design process very naturally and organically, and they do it with us one-on-one. Like we'll talk about, okay, so like what are you gonna do with your design?